August 2016. A contract crosses a desk in Washington. The number on it is $2.45 billion. It buys 28 of the most advanced trains ever ordered for American rails, and it comes with a low-interest federal loan announced by the sitting vice president himself. The engineering is approved, the money is allocated, the press releases call it the future. 10 years later, the trains are built. They cannot run at the speed they were designed for, a quarter of the fleet cannot run at all, and the dedicated building required to maintain them will not open until 2028. This is the arithmetic of the Avelia Liberty. This video is not an argument about whether high-speed rail is good, it is an audit. It is the accounting of how a procurement system spent $2.45 billion on machines and forgot to measure the garage. The central question is simple, and the record answers it in a way that should trouble anyone who believes modern institutions can still build things. How does a multi-billion-dollar contract, vetted by engineers and approved by federal agencies, fail to confirm that the trains will physically fit the places meant to service them? That is the question. The men who signed this contract were not stupid. The engineers who built these trains were not incompetent. And the failure happened anyway. So before we run the numbers, tell me in the comments. What is the most expensive logistical failure you have watched unfold inside your own industry, the kind where everyone did their job and the outcome was still a disaster? And if you would rather have the engineering record than the ribbon-cutting photo, subscribe to American Ironworks. This is the channel for the accounting. Nobody else runs. August 2016. Amtrak Awards. Alstom, the contract to build 28 next-generation high-speed train sets, branded the Avelia Liberty, sometimes called the next-gen Acela. The work is assigned to Alstom's historic plant in Hornell, New York. The supply chain spans 180 businesses across 29 states. This was meant to be a national industrial achievement, not just a train order. And on paper, the machine they designed is genuinely impressive. The Avelia Liberty produces 9,400 horsepower. The original Acela it was meant to replace produced 6,100. That is a 54% increase in power. It carries 386 seats, 27% more than the previous fleet. It is 30% lighter than the original Acela, despite meeting tougher safety rules. Its design speed is 186 miles per hour, with a theoretical ceiling of 220 on a dedicated line. And its signature feature is a system called Tiltronix. Active tilt is exactly what it sounds like. The way it works is the car body leans into a curve, up to 6.3 degrees, so the train can hold higher speed through bends that would otherwise force it to slow. On a railroad full of century-old curves, that tilt is the whole point. It was the engineering justification for the train's complexity and its price. Now hold that feature in your mind, because the record is going to take it away from you later. There is one more design choice that matters more than any spec sheet suggests. The Avelia Liberty is articulated. In a conventional train, each car rides on its own wheel frames, called bogies, at each end. In an articulated train, the bogies sit between the cars, shared across the joint. It is a proven European design, lighter and smoother. It is also a design that requires a completely different kind of maintenance facility to service. That sentence is the entire video. We will come back to it. Now set the timeline against the rest of the world, because the contrast is where the indictment begins. Japan launched its first bullet train on October 1st, 1964. France opened its first TGV line on September 27, 1981, planned and built in under a decade. As of 2026, the United States is only beginning to lay its first true high-speed track. That is 62 years behind Japan. And the Avelia Liberty itself, from the day the contract was signed to the day the first one carried a paying passenger, took 9 years. The original Acela, ordered in 1996, was running by 2000. The replacement took more than twice as long to reach service as the train it replaced. The deployment was originally promised for 2021, with some planning documents citing 2022. Revenue service actually began on August 28, 2025. 4 years late, and that is only partial service. So what happened in those 4 years? The answer is not one failure. It is a stack of them, and they compound. Start with the certification disaster because it sets the pattern for everything else. In October 2023, Amtrak's own Office of Inspector General published an audit. The finding that should stop you is this: Alstom began building the trains before validating the crash simulation models required to certify them. Think about the order of operations there. The logical sequence is to build the computer model, prove the model is correct, then build the hardware to match. Alstom built the hardware first. And when the simulations finally ran, the train sets failed the federal safety testing 13 times before they passed. 13. They did not clear the simulation until January 2024, nearly 3 years after the train was supposed to already be in service. The reason it took that long is its own small scandal. The Federal Railroad Administration needed certain data to predict long-term wear on the wheels and the track at high tilt angles. Alstom would not release it. The company classified it as proprietary. So the manufacturer built the machine and then refused to hand over the math required to certify the machine it built. That is not an engineering problem. That is an institutional one. Now here is where the train's signature feature disappears. Because of the unresolved validation, the Avelia Liberty currently runs in what the railroad calls Type B mode. Type B mode means the active tilt is switched off. The Tiltronix system, the feature that justified the train's complexity and its cost, is not being used in normal service. The single most expensive idea in the design is sitting idle, and the consequence is measurable. A Senate Commerce Committee analysis found the new trains run roughly 10 minutes slower than the original Acela they replaced. Read that again. A $2.45 billion investment to make the route faster produced a train that is slower. Amtrak's own president, Roger Harris, explained why in plain terms. The railroad cannot raise the speeds while the old Acela fleet and the new fleet share the same signaling infrastructure. The new train is being held to the pace of the old system it was built to replace. That is not a metaphor. That is the operating reality on the Northeast Corridor right now, and the infrastructure kept finding new ways to reject the machine. The trains had been tested at the rail facility in Pueblo, Colorado on clean, controlled track. But the Northeast Corridor is not clean or controlled. Portions of it date back nearly 2 centuries, shared with commuter trains and freight. When the Avelia Liberty hit that real-world wiring, it experienced loss of contact between the pantograph and the catenary. The pantograph is the arm on the roof that draws power from the overhead wire, the catenary. On older sections where the wire tension varies, the arm kept losing contact with the wire. That problem did not appear in Colorado. It only appeared on the railroad the train was actually built to run on. Then there was the safety overlay called ACSES, the Advanced Civil Speed Enforcement System, added to the corridor after September 11, 2001. Every one of these systems required its own certification layer. Critics describe the result with a phrase that fits: a Formula One car on a marathon course, a high-performance machine kneecapped by the only track it has to run on. The train was designed for a railroad that does not yet exist. But none of that is the failure this video is about. All of that is software, certification, and signaling. Those are problems you can eventually solve with patches and time. The failure at the center of this story cannot be patched because it is made of concrete. And here is the rhetorical question worth holding before we get there. Which is the more damning failure? A manufacturer that would not share its math, or an institution that never measured its own buildings? If you want the answer the record actually supports, keep watching and subscribe to American Ironworks so the next audit finds you. The Avelia Liberty cannot be properly maintained in Amtrak's existing facilities, not because the trains are too long to fit through a door. The reason is more specific and worse. Remember the articulated design, the bogies that sit between the cars instead of under them. To service those bogies, you cannot just roll the car over a standard inspection pit. You need a piece of equipment called a bogie drop. A bogie drop is a section of track that lowers, so the wheel assembly can be removed straight down from under the train. The existing Acela maintenance sheds do not have one. They were dimensioned and equipped for the previous generation of trains, the ones with conventional bogies. The new fleet needs a 2-bay covered workshop with overhead cranes, a dedicated wheel lathe, a bogie drop, and specialized test tracks. The primary existing Acela facility in Boston covers 15 acres. The capability required is not there at any size. Now here is the OIG finding that turns this from an oversight into an institutional indictment. The Inspector General identified a 15-year lag between the planning of the fleet and the planning of the facilities to maintain it. This was not a surprise discovered at the last minute. It was a known gap that was simply never closed. The audit found something even more revealing about why. It found there was no joint fleet and facilities plan at Amtrak at all. The departments operated in silos. The people buying the trains and the people responsible for the buildings to service them were not coordinating their decisions. The audit went further. Amtrak's 2 primary asset tracking systems contained misaligned data. Some assets appeared in one system, but not the other. Retired equipment was still listed as active. New operational equipment was missing entirely. So picture the actual situation. An institution that cannot reliably list what it owns, ordering $2.45 billion in trains without a coordinated plan for where to maintain them. The railroad trusted the spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet did not agree with itself. The consequence is concrete and ongoing. As the delays dragged on, delivered but uncommissioned train sets were simply warehoused. They were stored in yards in Philadelphia and in Olean, New York. Brand new high-speed trains parked, waiting. And even now, with partial service running, Amtrak can only operate 24 of the 28 train sets it bought. 4 trains are benched by the facility constraint. Proportionally, that is roughly $350 million of equipment sitting idle because there is nowhere adequate to maintain it. When the OIG audited the fleet, 12 train sets had been built. Every single one of them had documented defects. 12 of 12. The defect list reads like a stress test of the whole program. Hydraulic leaks in the active tilt system. Corrosion from water pooling between the cars. 5 windows that shattered spontaneously during testing. And, once in passenger service, door latches that failed, tray tables that would not stay stable, and visible misalignment between the power cars and the passenger coaches. These are the machines that cost $2.45 billion. The engineers built what they were asked to build. The institution around them could not get the basics right. So how do you fix a concrete problem? You pour more concrete. In 2026, Alstom announced a new maintenance facility in Newark, Delaware. The investment is over $55 million. The site is 20 acres with direct access to the Northeast Corridor main line. It will have everything the old sheds lacked: a 2-bay covered workshop with overhead cranes, a dedicated wheel lathe, a bogie drop, test tracks for post-maintenance validation, a 3rd outdoor storage siding. It will employ about 100 people, 50 transferred from an existing Alstom facility in Delaware, and 50 newly created. And here is a detail the press release handles carefully. Alstom is paying for this itself. The $55 million is not a separate Amtrak expenditure. It is buried inside the maintenance and support agreement that was part of the original $2.45 billion deal. The cost was always there. It was simply never measured in advance. Now look at when this building opens. Summer 2028. The contract was signed in August 2016. That is a 12-year gap between buying the trains and finishing the building required to properly maintain them. And the timeline is more absurd than that, because the sequence is backwards. The full fleet is targeted to be in service by the end of 2027. The dedicated maintenance facility opens in 2028. The garage opens after the cars are already supposed to be on the road. For its first 2 years of full deployment, a 28-train high-speed fleet will run without the purpose-built depot designed to keep it running. And the Newark facility is only one piece of a much larger bill. Amtrak is spending an estimated $4 billion total to upgrade maintenance facilities for the Avelia Liberty and its upcoming aero fleet. $4 billion. That is roughly half the value of the trains themselves, spent on the places to park and service them. The Philadelphia facility upgrade alone is $462 million. Major work in Seattle and Philadelphia will not be substantially complete until somewhere between 2027 and 2031. More than 20 rail yards across the East Coast are being modernized, and looming over all of it is a $47 billion state of good repair backlog that the Inspector General says Amtrak has no credible plan to eliminate. The trains were the easy part. The institution to support them is the part that does not exist. So what did the delay actually cost? The Senate Commerce Committee, in an audit chaired by Senator Ted Cruz, put the documented losses at $287 million. That figure combines lost revenue and the unplanned cost of keeping the aging first-generation Acela fleet running for 4 extra years. Nearly $300 million to wait for trains that were already built, and the human number underneath it. Through April 2026, Amtrak carried 55,000 fewer passengers than projected, driven by the slow rollout and the reliability problems. Sit with the full shape of this. A fleet bought to increase capacity and speed is currently running slower, carrying fewer people with a quarter of it benched, while the building meant to fix the problem is still 2 years from opening. Now compare that to how fast this used to be possible. Japan went from project commencement to a running bullet train in roughly 5 years. France built its first TGV line, from approval to service, in about 7 years. The original Acela went from order to revenue service in about 4 years. Those were not simpler machines for their era. They were ambitious machines, deployed by institutions that could still align an order with the ground it would run on. The Avelia Liberty took 9 years to reach partial service and 12 years to reach a finished maintenance depot. The machine did not get slower to build, the institution got slower to decide. And here is the layer that proves this is not a one-time mistake. The same audit looked at Amtrak's upcoming aero fleet, the ones meant for corridors outside the Northeast. Amtrak ordered 83 of them. Under current facility constraints, it can operate 12 of 83. The exact same failure, the trains arriving before the places to maintain them, is repeating on a second fleet at the same time. This is not bad luck, it is a pattern. It is the signature of an institution where fleet planning and facility planning live in separate rooms that do not talk. Which brings us to the part of this story where the government tries to legislate its way out of an engineering and procurement failure. On May 26, 2026, 2 members of Congress introduced H.R. 9036, the American High-Speed Rail Act. The sponsors are Representative Seth Moulton of Massachusetts and Representative Susan Delbene of Washington. By June 6th, it had 50 co-sponsors. The bill proposes $205 billion over 5 years, authorizing up to $41 billion annually to build a national high-speed rail system. The stated goal is to bring the United States to parity with Europe and Asia. And there is the irony, stated plainly. This bill arrives a full decade after the Avelia Liberty contract was signed. The legislative response to the failure is itself a monument to how long these things now take. Its passage is uncertain. The House stands at 212 Democrats to 217 Republicans. A competing surface transportation bill, the Build America 250 Act, has already moved through committee, and the existing infrastructure funding law expires on September 30th, 2026, creating a funding cliff underneath the entire debate. It is worth being clear about what this is not. This is not a partisan story. The bill to expand high-speed rail was written by Democrats. The audit that exposed the $287 million in losses was led by a Republican. The failure does not belong to a party. It belongs to a process. And there are two more institutional layers worth naming because they show the problem is still compounding. In 2026, some of the new train sets were fitted with promotional decals branded Freedom 250 and 1776 national champs, crediting the current administration. A political overlay on a machine that still cannot use its signature feature. And in May 2026, Amtrak filed a federal lawsuit against the MTA, alleging that Metro North was blocking access to tracks needed to move and test the new trains. One more institution, one more layer of delay added on top of all the others. So now we run the contrast directly. On one side, $2.45 billion of engineering. Trains with 54% more horsepower, 27% more seats, a 6.3-degree active tilt, built to a demanding new federal safety standard, assembled by 180 businesses across 29 states. On the other side, a single 20-acre building that costs $55 million, about 2% of the price of the trains. And the entire $2.45 billion investment was effectively held hostage by the $55 million building because the building did not exist when the trains arrived. That is not a budget problem. The money for the building was always inside the contract. It is a sequencing problem. The institution bought the expensive thing and forgot to schedule the cheap thing required to use it. Here is the reframe that the record forces. A high-speed train that sits in a yard because there is no facility to service. It is not transportation, it is inventory. A $2.45 billion fleet running slower than the trains it replaced, with a quarter of it benched, is not a modernization, it is a depreciation schedule. And the engineers who built these machines were not wrong. The trains do what they were specified to do. They make the power, they carry the passengers, they are built to the standard that was demanded. The failure was never in the steel. The failure was in the institution that bought the steel without measuring the ground it would stand on. That distinction is the whole accounting. The machine is correct. The process that ordered it was not. Now, the record allows two readings of why, and I am not going to pretend it resolves cleanly. The first reading is incompetence. A large bureaucracy with departments in silos and asset databases that do not agree simply failed to coordinate, and the 15-year planning lag is the proof. The second reading is structural, that no individual failed, that the procurement system itself is built in a way that separates buying trains from planning facilities, so the gap was inevitable the moment the contract was structured this way. The OIG documents the silos and the lag. It documents the absence of a joint plan. What it does not do is tell you whether this was negligence or design. Both answers are available in the record. Whether this is a story about people who failed or a system built to fail belongs to you. What the record does confirm is the outcome, and the outcome is not in dispute. Because here is what is actually happening right now, on the corridor, as you watch this. The trains are running. They are running with the tilt disabled. They are running about 10 minutes slower than the fleet they replaced. 4 of them are not running at all. The passengers riding them are riding a machine performing below the train it was meant to surpass on track that cannot use what makes it special, waiting for a building that opens in 2028. And the people who will ride the full fleet at its intended speed on a corridor that can finally use the tilt are years away from existing. The first true high-speed track in America is only now being laid 62 years after Japan. The machine is ready. The country it runs in is not. So here is the final accounting. $2.45 billion committed in August 2016. 28 train sets, of which 24 can currently run. 12 of 12 audited trains carrying documented defects. 13 failed simulations before certification. A tilt system, the train's entire reason for existing, switched off. A new fleet running 10 minutes slower than the old one. $287 million in documented losses, 55,000 missing passengers. A $55 million building that opens in 2028, 2 years after the fleet it serves is supposed to be complete. A 12-year span from signature to a finished shed. And the same failure already repeating on the Aero fleet, 12 of 83. The machines exist, the money is spent, and a high-speed train waiting on a $55 million shed is not a transportation system. It is a monument to a procurement process that forgot how to measure physical reality. The engineers did their job, the bureaucracy made sure it did not matter. Whether that is a story of people who failed or a system that was built to, is the question this video cannot close for you. The record gives you both. The cost is the same either way, and it is being paid right now, one slow train at a time. If you prefer the engineering record over the press release, subscribe to American Ironworks. This is the channel for the audit. Nobody else is willing to run, and tell me in the comments, what is the most expensive logistical failure you have watched inside your own industry? The one where everyone did their job and the building still was not there? I read them. That is where the next thread usually starts.